The Fall and Rise of Poland is one of European history's great dramas. We celebrate the 11th of November as Independence Day, and we should enjoy the moment and also remember what it cost us on the journey. And are there any lessons, if any, that we could teach others? Join me, Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Russia, Prussia and Austria are usually pointed to as the bad guys in the demise of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. While that's true, it was an unsung villain from the north, Sweden, who triggered the domino effect. Under King Charles X Gustav, Sweden invaded Poland-Lithuania in 1655, taking advantage of internal divisions among the nobles and the weak central authority of King John II Casimir Vasa. What also contributed to the Commonwealth's ill-preparedness was its exhaustion following the bloody Khmelnytsky uprising. The Deluge brought about massive destruction of cities, villages and infrastructure, comparable to the devastation of the 30 Years' War in Germany. The economy was reduced to tatters, agricultural production plummeted, precious goods were plundered, and the triad of plague, famine and murder reduced the Commonwealth's population by a staggering 40%. As some nobles sided with the Swedes, the nobility's distrust of each other and the centralized royal power deepened. These invasions were the first blow, described in Polish history as the Deluge. The second came during the Great Northern War of 1700 to 1721, when Poland, ruled by Augustus II the Strong, Elector of Saxony, was drawn into a conflict with Sweden. Poland effectively became a battleground and plaything of foreign powers, with some nobles siding with the Saxon, others pledging allegiance to the Sweden-imposed King Stanisław Leszczyński. This is how Sweden inadvertently did the dirty work for Prussia, Russia and Austria, three powers that gradually partitioned the Commonwealth in the latter part of the 18th century. The May 3rd Constitution, Europe's first, was the Commonwealth's swan song. A Hail Mary introduction of separation of powers, abolition of the nobility's veto, and boosting the king's position as the head of the executive. It was a heroic move, and one made belatedly.
I'm delighted to be joined today by Alina Nowobilska, independent historian based here in Warsaw, and a great friend to the programme, of course.
Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Great to have you. Our clip, we're going to be tracing the fall and rise of Poland throughout the last few hundred years. Our clip there starts with the Swedish invasion. Is that too simplistic, or what were the long-term root causes, if you like, of Polish weaknesses, or are we stressing the weakness bit instead of the strength of the Commonwealth?
I think it's more the weakness. The Swedes were more or less the trigger that kicked it all off, and it was the internal weaknesses that just forced the collapse faster and faster, and it's something that we're going to see as we talk of the decline, and again, of course, later on we'll talk about the rise and the decline yet again. So the problem is that Poland is internally divided, and this is something we're going to come through again and again and again as we continue through our conversation, and something that, you know, should be very important for modern day right now, which again, like I
yes,
said,
of course,
coming back to that one in just a moment. So the Swedes have now attacked Poland. Poland is completely and utterly, it's divided, it's politically divided. You've got nobles who are moving over to the Swedish, basically preaching allegiance to them and saying, you know, we're not interested in the Polish Commonwealth anymore, we want to align ourselves with the Swedes. You have foreign powers getting their way and influencing the government. It's the power of veto in this Polish government, which is a really important thing, because if you veto a bill or something along those lines, that bill can then, especially if it's an important bill, will therefore not become valid. And you can't pass this bill without making the country better.
Unanimous,
And this is the problem when you've got people that are completely and utterly fracturing the Polish government, so the Polish Sejm, so the parliament, completely being fractured left, right and centre by the nobility. And there is just no structure. For example, the Swedes then, like I said, they've invaded the Lithuanian part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, turning around and saying, we're going to align ourselves with the Swedes now. This is a fracture. Poland is falling apart. They have nothing to be able to fight against the Swedes with, because if you're not united, how are you going to be able to fight this incredibly powerful... because the Swedes at this point, they are really powerful. They've got a huge amount of land that they've accumulated left, right and centre around them. Poland's the next one.
This period of history, of the development of European consciousness, I suppose, was it a Polish versus Swedish war, or was it, as I understand it, a squabble within the family, within the Vasa dynasty, between the between the Protestant Vasas and the Catholic Vasas based in Poland?
It's a Polish squabble. At the end of the day, like I said, the invasion was just, the tip of the iceberg. It's internal squabbles that are happening within the Polish Commonwealth, within the government itself, within the nobility. And you can't really have a united nation, a united country, a Commonwealth, as we're talking about. It doesn't work. If everybody is fractured and working for themselves or working for whatever they want rather than what's the good of the country, what is the point in being able to, and how are you even going to be able to fight the Swedish when you've got this huge force, a modern army coming in and really rapidly going straight through Poland? How is it going to work? It's not.
So what was the motivation for fight? Were they fighting for the Polish king, the Jan Kazimierz, or were they fighting for the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the ideal of that?
Fighting for themselves more than anything, because by this point, if Lithuania is leaving the Polish Commonwealth, what is there left to fight for? Jan Kazimierz, for example, he is trying to revolution, I think is the right way. He's trying to uprise and trying to gain power and trying to gain his lands back. He's not doing it. It's not happening, all because of internal squabbles. And this is something we're going to hear repeated is internal squabbles. And it's just I'm sorry, it is just ridiculous at this point. Fighting for what you want, not for what the nation and what the country wants. And that's what's more important to these people. The government is completely broken. Parliament is broken. Vetoes left, right and centre. Foreign powers, again, this is the other thing. People are being bribed left, right and centre. And we see this in modern day periods where people are bribing other people left, right and centre. So there is no stability at all.
There's also this idea that the nobility, in preserving their freedom, also don't allow themselves to be taxed, to actually raise the money for armies or mercenaries, or
they're doing the easiest thing, which is to align themselves with Sweden, and we see that
to preserve their fortunes.
Well, this is the whole thing. They want to stay. That's how they stay rich. That's how rich people stay rich. They don't spend the money really, and they don't spend taxes either. And at the end of the day, we see this repetitively in some of the largest families within the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
Does it get worse from the Swedish Deluge, so the mid-17th century? We see later on, 100 years later, the Saxons, then Stanislav August comes in. Is this a process, this Swedish invasion, if we can call it Swedish, from which, is that a body blow from which the Commonwealth never really recovers? Simple. Or does it make efforts?
Well, simple answer is yes. That is just going to completely and utterly decline. However, there is a however. The Poles do manage to fight the Swedes. They manage to push them out of Poland, and that is it's a great success. Amazing. Thank you. Fabulous. However, this is, again, as I come to this, the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, it is a rapid decline from this very moment onwards, where Poland just heads straight down to the partition period, one of three, which we see in 1793.
Yes.
So eventually it does end up with the partition period, and foreign powers, putting in their 2 cents into having a weak and divided Poland, because that's what they want.
We're going to have a look at the partition period and the aftermath of that in our next clip now.
Poland disappeared from world maps for 123 years. Its territories annexed by the Kingdom of Prussia, the Russian Empire, and the Habsburg Empire. But Poland's culture, ideals, and spirit survived. remaining alive in the hearts and minds of Poles both at home and across the diaspora. Poles, together with other ethnic groups of the now deceased Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, rose up in two major pro-independence revolts: the November Uprising of 1830 to 1831 and the January Uprising of 1863 to 1864. Though these insurrections ultimately failed, they kept the flame of liberty alive. The turmoil of World War I opened a window of opportunity for Poles to rise once again. With their ranks suffering attrition, Germany and Austria sought to win Poles over by promising to establish a puppet kingdom of Poland. To this end, a regency council was formed as the interim ruling authority. Yet the Polish people refused to settle for a mere illusion of independence. Fighting on both sides of the World War I belligerents, Polish soldiers became battle-hardened, gaining experience that would soon prove indispensable in reclaiming the country's independence. At the same time, the Polish military organization under future Marshal Józef Pilsudski was targeting the occupiers' supply chains and operations. As World War I was drawing to an end, Poland's Regency Council proclaimed the nation's independence on October 7, 1918. Pilsudski returned to Warsaw on November 10th, and his imprisonment in Magdeburg, as Polish soldiers and civilians were disarming German troops still stationed in the city. The following day, November 11th, the Regency Council transferred all authority to him, a moment now commemorated as the symbolic restoration of Poland's independence. But with the Soviet Union rising in the east and the post-World War I chaos marring the region with uncertainty, neither Poland's fate nor the issue of its borders was set in stone yet.
We'll come to these extraordinary times, late October, early November 1918. Empires fall, Poland emerges. But let's talk about the 19th century. We saw there that the flame was kept alive by an intellectual elite, if we can say that. But generally, Europe was okay with Poland not existing.
Very difficult style question you give me here, because Poland just didn't exist and it tried to keep itself alive. You see, we had Chopin, we had some famous artists and musicians and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, and I've probably used this before, and I'm going to use it again because I love it. And that's Józef Pilsudski, and that's Józef Pilsudski in the early days of when he was a child. So we talk about him where we've seen all these photographs and videos of him, you know, from 1918 and how he's the modern father of Poland and things like that. But Józef Pilsudski himself, as well as many, many others, like Elżbieta Zawadzka, Wanda Gerz, all of these very famous Poles that we see in the 20th century, they themselves grew up under what we call as the Partition period. They had no chance of speaking Polish or reading, writing, learning their culture, religion, everything and anything. And it was their mothers. It was their mothers that did absolutely everything and anything. They had hidden books. They learned Polish in secret. And we're talking specifically more under the Prussian and the Russian occupation. Austria was a little bit more lenient. So let's take Austria out of this equation for the moment, but under the two most difficult powers. And they had this opportunity to love their country and want to know more about their country and see freedom. And the same thing for Pilsudski. The first moment he tastes real, true freedom, he hasn't seen it for his whole life. And I think he's 50, something along those lines. My mathematics are out the window. When he steps foot on the 10th of November 1918, he steps foot onto true and free Poland. And that for me is a really powerful moment in Polish history. But yeah, all of these people, they've grown up in secret with language, religion and culture and things like that, all because of mothers. Very important people.
Yes, it's the feminine, the motherly element in all of this. You're dead right. It's an amazing time when, as a historian, you ask yourself why do these empires fall in a question of days, and why should Poland find itself emerge as a state, not just a nation? It seems that time has telescoped generations and generations into a couple of weeks, and whole empires and systems collapse, and out of the chaos Poland finds itself independent. Was this a combination that the Poles were very quick off the mark to take advantage of this? They saw what was coming, and they kind of stole a march on events.
Everything above is a simple answer. Very simple. That's the easiest way to explain it. However, at the same time, you've got problems going on in Russia. So you have the fights with the Bolsheviks and that whole chaos emerging from 1917. So Poland, of course, is going to take advantage of that. Internal struggles, I mean, we've just seen that in the previous section. You know, if there's internal struggles and a weakness, why don't you take advantage? So Poland's going to, of course, take advantage of that.
Yeah.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire, completely and utterly falling apart. The Germans, or the Prussians, or however we want to call them now, they are also struggling internally. They're also going to completely and utterly fall apart because they're losing the war. So yeah, Poland right now is going to take its chance. Why not? Why don't you take that moment to say, we're going to create our nation once again and we're going to be free, because we haven't been free for 123 years. So now is our chance.
And what was it's one thing being a nation, and you have this perhaps a romantic view of what Poland is. You mentioned Pilsudski's upbringing and the maternal influence in all of this. But they have to build a state. They have to build armies, civil service, functioning railways, all that sort of stuff. That's the hallmark of a modern state. How did the Poles go about that? Was it from the bottom up, or the elites saying how to do these things?
Everything in between, it becomes absolutely chaotic. As you mentioned, there is no nation from 1918, November 1918. There is no nation. All in all, however you want to say, building a state is very difficult. But you've also got influences coming from the Bolsheviks, as we very well know. 1920, we're fighting the Bolsheviks. We're fighting in Vilnius, Lvov, Lviv against the Ukrainians. We're fighting 1918, 1919, 1920. All against the Germans. We're fighting in 1918, again against the Germans in Poznan. So not only are they trying to build a nation, they're struggling with border disputes, massive border disputes, trying to claim back pre-war, pre-123 year lost land. That's another whole kettle of fish. You have no politics, you have no social structure, you have nothing, there is nothing that exists, no army. Your army is coming not only from Russia, not only from Austria, Hungary, Italy as well in itself, because you have troops stationed in Italy, you have troops still stationed in France. So you're having to get through half of Europe to get back to Poland to be able to not only create an army, but to also fight these border disputes. It is absolute and total chaos in Poland at this point, and they are trying desperately from above, from below, every angle you could possibly think of to try and recreate this nation. And it takes a long time for Poland to even become anything that you could, I don't even know how to say it in the end, to become whole, to become that romanticized version that you claimed.
Yeah. As a historian, you look on Polish history, you know what happens to the country, to the people. Do you see these recurring themes of internal division and foreign meddling influence repeating themselves after 1918?
Of course.
Does that formula, is that an unending formula?
Of course, it constantly repeats itself. It's repeating itself now. You know, we're never going to step away from foreign meddling. So, for example, the Bolsheviks are just not happy, or from 1923, let's call them the Soviets. They're not happy that they've lost all this land. Neither is Germany. I mean, that caused one of the rises of Hitler, for example, is that Poland has taken territory from Germany. It's lost a lot of its, let's say, pre-1918 territory. They are desperately trying to meddle. However, Pilsudski, as we very well know, Pilsudski stands his ground. And any time Hitler mentions some sort of border dispute, then Pilsudski is suddenly sending his troops right onto that border section, and he's holding steadfast. So we see this repetitively. There's no more Austro-Hungarian really empire, so that's not really much of a threat. There are still border disputes between Slovakia and the Czech Republic, so the Czechoslovakia at the time. Of course, we see that in 1938, that is something that's repeated there. And yeah, I think I think we should stop there, because I can go on and on and on about foreign powers meddling, so we'll never ending.
We talked about, well, we're going to talk about Pilsudski a bit now. What are the chief characteristics that you would say enabled him to negotiate the Prussian withdrawal, the German withdrawal, 1918, and forge the country. Do we place too much emphasis on his contribution, great though it is? We have the Regency Council there, stealing a march on the Germans by a month earlier, declaring independence. We have people like Daszyński, Ignacy Daszyński, Wincenty Witos, Roman Dmowski. What does Pilsudski stand head and shoulders above the rest?
Oh, you're talking to someone who does love Pilsudski, so I might be.
Why do you love him?
I might be a little bit biased. I think part of that reason is that my great-grandfather fought for Pilsudski, so I think it kind of falls down from generation to generation, the love of Pilsudski. I think more or less at the end of the day, he is the one who becomes the head at the end. He takes power, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a very difficult question to answer without.
He's appointed to it.
Exactly, this is the whole thing, and he takes power again and again and again, and I want to say this right and not put myself deeper into a hole with all of this, but he becomes and is known as the father of modern day Poland. We know that, and I think it's that overshines the contribution of everybody else. It also stems into World War II politics and who comes out on the top, and unfortunately there is that internal division within that. I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead of time, but that also becomes a massive division within the Polish armed forces itself that causes internal problems again and that time period, and that is, do you love Pilsudski or are you a Dmowski fan? And something we see very repeated constantly throughout Polish history, unfortunately, because Pilsudski is the military man, Dmowski is our politician, as you say. And to be honest, they more or less did roughly the same thing, trying to gain independence for Poland, but I think just Pilsudski comes out on top because Dmowski doesn't really take power until later in the 1930s, and Pilsudski's there from 1918. You see him come off the train in November of 1918, and you see the crowds. Is that happening for Dmowski?
Yeah.
No, it's not, but it's happening for Pilsudski. So,
a final question to you: when you see the chaos of Europe in October 1918, November 1918, Poland probably has the right kind of people that it needed.
It did.
The hard-nosed, not necessarily cosy politicians.
Yes, because everybody else is falling apart, yet Poland has picked the right people for the right job. And that's what's repeated about Pilsudski a lot of the time. He was the right man for the right time, for the right job. Would have Dmowski done a different job? Would have any of the other politicians done the right thing? I don't know. This is a what-if question. It's a very dangerous question.
Cometh the hour, cometh the man, isn't it?
Exactly. So we could speculate. We could think about that possibly Dmowski would have changed Poland for the better. He might have. He might not have. So if we have a time machine and anybody's willing to build one for us, that would be great. We can go and see a what-if question. I'd be really happy for that. So.
There's still internal division and foreign meddling. That's the bane of Polish existence.
Always, and it's never going to end, and we're still continuing to modern day politics and modern day divisions, political divisions, which is one thing I should remind the people watching: do not divide us, keep us together. A united Poland is stronger.
Great. Well, Alina Nowobilska, thank you very much once more for coming onto the programme. Great to have you.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for today. Do have a great time on our Independence Day, the 11th of November, and join us next time for How We Got Here. That's Tuesdays, 35 minutes past 9, 21:35. See you then.